everybody. What's going on at work? It's good to be back with these member calls. Over to you, Morten.
Thank you, Janus. Yes, so my name is Morten Elvang. I'll introduce myself in a second. And really happy to be here and talk about what's going on at work and how we can deal with it. In a way, this is also a celebration because I have been joining Janus and probably meeting some of you in the peer groups and some conferences around the world. So I'm thinking today as a bit of a summary of what we have been looking at there. So you probably know me, some of you. For those who don't, I have been spending most of my life in large organizations, helping teams of different sizes to get things done. And then I have a special skill I have come to realize as a bubble burster, meaning I'm the guy who is typically asking for a second time if you have really thought about something and are sure about it. Anyway, enough of that. I actually wanted to start with asking your 2 cents on this. So what we will be talking about today is what's going on at work. What are the things you talk about at the water cooler and the coffee machine? How does it feel right now? What's trending? All of that. So I would invite you to join the Menti, and I hope I can make this work. To just share in the word cloud your thoughts on what's really happening. And I hate to give it away, but I'm quite sure that ChatGPT and generative AI and AI will be there. But I think the rest is up to you. So we'll just give it a minute or two and see what comes up there. We also put a link in chat if that's easier for you to just click there. So please put at least just one thing. Otherwise, this is not fun. It's also going to be a poker game because I can no longer change the slides, and what I have taken away from the many conversations in the groups and from other contexts, I'll share in a second. So predictably, AI is in the middle in big blue. LLMS. Suppose that's. I don't actually know what that is, but I guess large language models, clear direction, crisis, fascism. It'd be interesting to double click on. Automate routine tasks, data as an asset. So I will go back to the presentation and start sharing my things. I think if you want, you're welcome to keep putting your words, and I will distribute this with the material. So let me share a bit of what I want to do. So as I said, this is a bit of a celebration for some of the talks we have had. I'm going to cover how does it feel at work, what have I been hearing. Then I will talk about the element of surprise. I will talk about what we can do about it, of course, from my view. So it's a piece of advice and a thought for you. I will talk about getting on strategy and staying on strategy. I think the topic of strategy has a special role to play. And if there's time at the end, we will make one more Menti. If not, we won't. Let's see how it goes. And really, the beef of this presentation is an update on the relevance of strategy and ideas for what you can do about it. So how does it feel at work? And I said, this is from all the many conversations in all the many places we have been in the past 6 months. And don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes what I hear is a bit like this. It can feel a bit hectic. And I think you covered some of the same things in what you said. The big things I hear is this work about work, endless preparations and meetings, a lot of work that actually could be either avoided or digitized, automated, augmented, and then new demands, if not existing demands, piling up. And it's interesting to also put some numbers. So if you look at statistics which are available, less than half of our colleagues feel outcome productive in with the time. I mean, you feel outcome productive in less than half of your time. As much as 80% can actually be digitized. And when you look at the load levels, it's not uncommon to be 3 times or more above the level. And then, of course, in this there are some topics which are top of mind. And what I have heard, corresponding a bit to what you said, is everybody just agree that there's too many changes coming. So change on change on change is the most common one I hear. Then there's an interesting one which has been emerging in the peer group conversation, is that I think a lot of us are really dealing with the question of how to lead up. I mean, what do we do when we know something that we would want everybody else to know? And then the general question, something seems to be changing. What do we actually do about it? So then when we start to look at a bit what is really changing at work, there seems to be a transition at the moment from what you could call drive for value or figuring it all out and driving execution, the famous strategy execution topic, getting things done, to more and more realizing that the power to change is in the power to handle change, meaning that how we deal with the changes is actually as important as getting on top of each and every one. So in that sense, if you accept that idea, then strategy has a special role to play in the center of the adaptive organization. And the whole trend of digitizing work is the enabler to make the more adaptable organization possible. But actually, it's also a driver in itself, which causes a bit of confusion. So it's almost like a catch-22, that to be fully adaptable, you need to be digital. To make sense of digital, you actually need to be more adaptable and flexible. And that can cause some confusion and hesitation. So that's where I'm coming from with this, what's going on at work. Then change and change almost gives it away that not all change is planned. So let's look at the element of surprise. And here I took inspiration from my person. I think you all know and have met Christian Vance Andersen, who contributed the Green Rabbit. But basically, surprises come in 3 forms. They can overlap. You can also say it doesn't really matter what is it one or the other, because the nature of surprise is that it happens now. You cannot be surprised yesterday or tomorrow. But 3 types. So bubbles is a bit like the emperor's new clothes. Suddenly you realize that something is not like you thought it was, and the bubble bursts. Then there is the sudden shift, the weather changes. COVID is a good example. And then there are the strokes of serendipity, which is a bit, as Christian described it in his latest book, Magic at Work. It's like a green rabbit that's suddenly jumping around there in the office, and you're a little bit wondering what it is. The interesting thing when you look at them is that there are some differences. So the weather shift is generally unknowable, meaning like if you had known, you would have taken that umbrella, but you didn't, so you get wet, which is kind of hard to ignore. So unknowable and hard to ignore is really sudden. But with that insight, you can then ask, what about the 2 others? And I'll just give it away. So the interesting thing about the bubble is that actually that's knowable. If you are living in a bubble, it's for you to realize that you are in a bubble, and it's for you to burst that bubble. The thing with the bubbles is that they tend to be too easy or too comfortable to ignore. So they last longer than they should. The typical example is the late and overrun project that doesn't really deliver as it should. Then on the new opportunity side, unknowable, but easy to ignore. So if you're a busy person, you'll say, wow, this sounds like a great idea, but we don't have time for it. The interesting thing then is that actually, once you know this idea, then it becomes knowable. You actually know it. And it means that you can no longer say that you didn't know. It's a real option for you to explore that option once you get in another frame of mind. The surprises are interesting because they really drive what we do. So it's the ability to see and deal with those surprises that typically make the difference. So then when we get to talk about what can we do about it, this is a report from the peer group conversations. And I wanted to just frame this a little bit differently. So I think you can see this as a way of painting on the knowledge we already have, that new insights emerge on top of what we already know. So if you take that perspective, you can say, what was it we have been talking about in the different conversations, which have all been a little bit different? What have been the insights that we shared? I wanted to bring three up here. So one is the question of what is the job of strategy? And that's a picture you can paint on top of the scaled agile framework. We have done that in a few of the conversations. So really, from that perspective, you can paint a picture that shows that strategy is the key to liberation and building an adaptable organization. And you need to make strategy a first-class citizen, not just some stone tablet that comes down from the mountain. Then we have also been discussing about what is your Lego at work, coming from a really great book that I know some of you know because we talked about it, Bjørn Gardner, How Big Things Get Done. And as it turns out, our work is our Lego. So the better we can shape and form and manage that, the better we can do what we need to do. So the mantra here is manage it. You work at a speed where you can afford to lose, meaning that you shouldn't get too much ahead of yourself, but do big things in small pieces that you can all the time afford to change your mind. And then the last one, what about surprises? Well, absorbing and prospering from surprises is really the key to success, meaning impact and resilience, where impact is the more short-term result and resilience is the ability to do that sustainably over time. That resonates super well with the Danish leadership model that basically talks about seasonal change, the difference between the dream and the detail, and how to reconcile the two of them. And the story we have been discussing can really usefully be painted on top of that. And then you can say, okay, if there's just one thing to take out of that, what would that actually be? So that is, again, this insight that the power to change is in the power to handle change. Or if you are on the way down a skiing slope, the way to get down is to manage it one turn at a time, meaning that you got to stay on those skis more than you need to rush to the bottom. So the avoidance of failure over the drive for value and the impact. Very well. So what does all of that mean? Well, the piece of advice from my side is to really start using the idea of strategy and strategizing with your friends and colleagues in a way that you get on a strategy and stay on that strategy. And let's talk a little bit about how can you do that usefully by having different conversations and even hacks to get on that strategy. This is probably, from my side, the most important slide in this presentation. It basically says that you constantly got to think about what's the best under the circumstances. I can call that the implied strategy, which is a mismatch of what the big people wish, what you're actually doing, and the kind of chocolates that life is offering you on the way, the surprises that come. And then you have like a constant conversation, what's the best we can do, which is a bit of both absorbing to what's coming your way, but also following your hunches of what to do. The best example I know is Walmart versus Amazon. And I think all of you might not appreciate the same way as I do, but this is still my baby, so I will share it. So what I really like about the story Walmart versus Amazon is that we tend to think that Walmart would be the underdog. But what has happened recently is that that Walmart has decided to go online in a way that they don't send the stuff to your home, but you got to go to Walmart and pick it up. So they actually found a way to save the last mile, reinforce brick and mortar, and are now recognized as one of the organizations in the retail segment who can really sort of challenge Amazon, obviously in the whole food place, like the grocery business. And part of the interest that makes this story interesting is that Blockbuster had a similar story. I just picked that up recently. Is that at some point in time, Blockbuster was going through exactly the same process. They created an online store. They did a hybrid, whatever. But someone lost their nerve, an activist investor, and made what we would call a call to order. He fired the CEO. They went back to in-store shopping, brick and mortar, and I think we all know the history of what happened. But actually, at the time, I'll share the case in the end of this deck that Janice will probably send out later. At the time, Netflix was really under pressure from the online competition from Blockbuster. So implied strategy. And that's one of the hacks you can do, which you might want to try at home, is ask the question, is the strategy you have really the strategy that you want? And if you're a little bit wondering, okay, so what is this strategy really? You're not alone, because people tend to disagree even about what it is. But a good way to think about it is that it needs to answer two questions. It is, where do we want to play, and how do we plan to win? Where to play and how to win is a good way. And it's surprisingly often that you will realize that a little difference on a big thing you're already doing can make a difference. So like taking on the online thing really made a big difference that helped reinforce other aspects of the business for Walmart. And there are two questions you can ask, which basically give you a test of your strategy. Question number one is, does it solve your biggest problem? Question number two is, does the opposite make sense? So if you want to deliver the best customer experience, then that's not really a sharp strategy, because the opposite doesn't make any sense. But if you decide to focus on a certain customer segment, then that would pass the opposite test, because focusing on the other segments might make equally sense, and this may be what some of your competitors are doing. Janus, do we have time for one more Menti?
Yes, I would say so.
Let's shoot for it then. So I wanted to invite you to do one more Menti, and let me just shift the screen, which is way simpler than the other one. So this is basically asking the question, imagine that you would approach one of your good colleagues at work. Think of it as any colleague. So in general, would that colleague be able to explain strategy? And this is again a poker game, so I will share with you what the world would say if you asked this question. And please, so let's just give it a second. So it's 50-50-50. Thank you. Now it is the perfect 50-50-50. So please keep sending your answers in. I'll pick them up and add them to the presentation. And the idea of asking you is, of course, as much to give you a chance to reflect on the question. So let me go back to this and share my poker cards. So what the world would say, should it be asked, then it would actually say that less than 1 in 10 of people at work know their strategy so well that they can explain it. There's some variation up and down the ladder. So for very senior leaders, it's typically 1 in 2, or people quite far away from from wherever strategy gets decided, it's typically less than 10. And when you ask leading strategy experts, they would say that the sport of strategy is not going too well in most companies. So a person like Roger Martin, who I have a big heart for, literally says that 85% of all companies doesn't have a useful strategy. So it's down to 50% on what he thinks is useful. And that really is the burning platform, because the importance of strategy is going up in a sense that it's part of the overall alignment in the organization. And as things change, you need to change your mind more often. And if you're not in agreement on what you try to do, it's actually harder to agree to do something else. So that's the real burning need for this. I'm wrapping up just with the last things summarizing. So increasing rate of change takes what I call an open and emergent approach, more flexible, open, adaptable organization. It's a bit of a catch-22 because digital is needed for the flexibility and flexibility is needed for the future digital. Strategy is the key in steering in an adaptive organization. And a trademark of useful strategy is that it solves your biggest problem. And if you ask if the opposite should be the case, that would make sense. I think I will land it here and leave just a little time for questions and comments. So I'll pass back to you, Janus.
That works, Morten. Thank you so much for taking us through it. Thanks for making it interactive, and thank you for some amazing slides, great content, quotes, and a little bit of time for Q&A. Anybody who feels like jumping in with questions, reflections? I know Morten, also similar to me, likes feedback. So you don't need to have a question, but it can be reflections, something that made you think. So the way we normally do it is that either somebody volunteers or I pick somebody out there.
You can pick me to volunteer.
All right, Andreas. Good to also get the occasion to hear that you speak English as well. I know some people joined early when Andreas I was small talking in Danish. So over to you. I know this topic is also close to your heart.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. I just want to say thank you so much, Morten, for an extremely clear and well laid out presentation of a subject with such a high complexity, and delivering that in 30 minutes. I think that's simply amazing. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. That's appreciated.
So that was Andreas, I think, from the streets of Copenhagen. Anybody else wants to jump in, or perhaps this is the time?
I would like to thank you. As I think I also have observed one thing in digital projects. So it's a little bit like that. That often, if you do digital projects, you also help transform the organization, which is being kind of wagging the dog's tail. So it's in German it's like a little bit like there's a saying that sometimes the tail tries to wag the dog. So it's a little bit like that. That sometimes we feel that organizations, well, first of all, they're not really aware that they really need to have this attitude. So and they're often misunderstanding the root and the cause. So it's a little bit like that they're looking for digital solutionism and expect that this happens like magic overnight to them, and then with a digital solution they will end up becoming more agile, or and then at the end, first of all, you have to help those companies to transform into a more agile organization. But if then you might hit the glass wall, as you were describing it, that sometimes there's people in the management that have a strategy, but people that are in the other places need to actually able to execute on that, and they don't know the strategy. They don't even know where to go. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult digital projects. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Well, you're spot on, Oliver, and the picture we painted on top of the scaled agile framework is exactly painting that picture. I think that's the crux of the whole reimagining or downfall of agile movement, is that we never managed to cross that barrier where we got into the space of money and objectives, which is what we need to do. So the suggestion is to scale on something we call a portfolio, not teamwork and dependencies, which has been the classical approach for agile transformations. Thank you.
All right, good. Anybody else wants to jump in? Questions, reflections?
Well, Morten, maybe one question that comes to my mind when I look at your great charts is, do you advocate a transformation to this new way of working through more of a structured top-down approach with methodologies and rigor in governance? Or are you more taking the transformation from a bottom-up culture, people type of approach? If you want to comment on how to make it happen a little bit.
So that's a super good question. It's actually from the middle out. So the way I know to get started with this is to start shaping those conversations. Recently, I like to think of it that you have some hacks to get back on your strategy, because everybody has one. Even if you say you don't, you cannot operate in a larger organization without some notion of strategy. But people might have different ones, or they might not know what it is. And then you would start conversations around that, which, if you're familiar with the Scaled Agile framework, it's not unlike the PI plannings. We just don't do the planning because that's futile with so many people and so many things. But you would more have a bit of a reconciliation and ask yourself, wow, this looks really great. Is that really what we want to do? Or should we change our mind in a few places? Which plays on emergence, meaning that you have different ideas bubble up in the same place so you can see how well they match up.
Thank you.
Great. One thing I've noticed in our conversations in Toronto and elsewhere where you've been, Morten, is that people sometimes open their eyes when they hear about the black market of common sense. I think we have a minute here at the end for you to spread the message a little bit further about that black market.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think to the first picture I shared, and of course it was a huge exaggeration with this gorilla monster with red eyes and flaming papers here and there and everywhere. So the joke is that in an organization which is more against you than with you, not really supporting your work, then you can always find a black market for common sense, meaning people getting things done outside the red tape. And the beauty is that once you introduce this concept and you start asking people what's going on the black market for common sense, after a little bit of hesitation, you hear wonderful stories of how you're succeeding outside the formal road infrastructure in the company.
Great, Morten. That's all we had. We're right on time. Thank you so much. Like it's already been said, impressive to condense it. Thank you for accepting the challenge to broaden the message here to everybody. Really appreciate it. I'll do my best as usual to try to write it up and share the recording. And I know Morten is also very happy to keep the conversation going.
Yes, anytime, just ping me. Thank you.
To everybody.
Bye-bye.